So I'll pause on that one before I go on to the forward look at that. Okay.
No, that's fine. So any questions or comments for Rachel? I'll just make one point, if I may. I mean, it's relevant in terms of the discussions we had on our patient story. We are improving with 14,000 hours lost hours. It's a lot better than it was. But, just keep in our minds that I think the plan was based on about 6,000 lost hours.
6,000.
So we're a very, very long way away from where we want to be. But another statistic we should put out of this is, which is quite interesting, but also quite salutary, is that I think I'm right in saying, somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, I think of those 14,000 lost hours, nearly 50% of them, 7,000 lost hours, were from one single hospital trust, which means actually that there is a lot of improvement across Wales, but it's not universal. But the fact that there were 7,000 hours lost from just one single trust is clearly of great significance, I think. And the other comment about, just so we're aware of it, we see it here all the time, but it's an interesting statistic, and it's the number of handovers which are in excess of 45 minutes. And, we are still running at over 4,000 handovers that are taking over 45 minutes. And that could be 46 minutes, or it could be 12 hours. We don't, it's a blunt instrument, that data, but it still does demonstrate that there are a lot of people that are still waiting quite a long time. Any other thoughts, Karen?
I just wanted to ask about the ambulance care and the NEPS work, because when you look at the previous report data for me as well, when you look at the numbers, one of my concerns is where patients are experienced less repeatedly cancelling appointments, do they then drop out of the service completely? And I think at the previous conversation on this, I was referring to ophthalmology patients because injections for fluid generation are really important in terms of preserving sight. And so, if I'm perhaps an older person and I'm all ready to go to the hospital and then cancelled again, am I just going to go, well, I'm not going to bother anymore? Now, you hope that that's not the case, but I just wonder whether that data captured anywhere by a hospital or by us. It may be that we can't collect it, but I think it's quite important as an instance.
Thanks, Kerry. Two angles on this, if I can. The first is we track that data for renal patients for the very obvious reason. So multiple or consecutive cancellations for renal patients is something that we monitor because there's a very clear clinical consequence of missing multiple renal appointments. I do know that the team do their best to avoid multiple or consecutive cancellations for the same patients. That it is a consideration, a part of their consideration when they're looking at the capacity. For me, I think there is an opportunity here, and the team have been working really hard to think about how can we improve the experience for patients with the NET service. We know at its heart, for a number of reasons, the capacity is not there to deal with volume that we have. And what the team is looking to do is, in a sense, to reverse engineer how the capacity we have can be used. So at the moment, the general trend is bookings are accepted. And then on the day when it comes to deploying the plans, we don't have enough capacity and we are cancelling some patients at short notice. Just by way of reminder, though, that's not the greatest proportion of cancellation. The greatest proportion of cancellations are as a consequence of hospital cancellations and patient themselves cancelling. The third greatest is us cancelling. So I just wanted to re-emphasise that. That's where the greatest efficiency is. Hospitals not cancelling appointments and by patients not cancelling appointments themselves, journeys themselves. But there are, of course, legitimate reasons sometimes for those. We then come in with our cancellations because of capacity. What we want to do is reverse engineer that, which is instead, when a patient is attempting to make their booking, we have already understood in advance what the capacity is and whether we are beginning to exceed that capacity. So instead, what we can say to a patient is, whilst you may be eligible, we do not have the capacity in order to transport you on that day. Can you please rearrange your appointment and call us back? So we want to try and reverse engineer. In a sense, there is therefore some sort of capping, but that capping is around capacity. But that's happening anyway, because we've only got so much capacity for so many journeys. And so can we do that in advance, upfront with a patient, to be able to say, it's looking like our plan is not going to permit that journey on that day, rather than us saying, thank you for your booking, we may ring you on the day, unfortunately, to cancel. Instead, what we say is in advance, sorry, capacity is not available that day. Could you please rearrange back to us? And then hopefully we can reschedule the journey. So that's, for me, probably the single greatest shift we're attempting to make to improve the experience. But yes, renal, yes, we are monitoring it because clinically it's very important. Of course, we'd be alert to either concerns being raised. As we know, that's the greatest generator at the moment of concerns, NEPS cancellation. So we want to reduce that experience, taking action there. But we would only monitor outside of renal as a consequence of a concern being raised. But staff are looking at patterns of cancellation where they can.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. A specific point about the shift overruns. And last week I went to the ED outside Glangwili in Carmarthen. Staff were really, really complimentary about the pod we have there. I know it's not just, we don't have just one in Carmarthen. What it's helping is to reduce shift overruns, because staff and the patient can leave the ambulance, go into the pod, the new crew comes in and the old crew can go. So staff were really, really praiseworthy about it's very innovative, and I think, we can see from these figures, the latest figure is below the 2-year average. I know we're trying to drive down shift overruns, but innovative measures like that are really, really helping. And it was reassuring speaking to staff and saying we have far less shift overruns now than we used to have. So they're not massive measures, but they're helping. And I think that's, to have that evidence and to speak to staff who are saying this is great, it's helping, was reassuring. So well done to everybody who is continuing to innovate, to ensure these metrics can come down to acceptable levels.
Yeah,
good.
Thank you. I just had a question about patient experience surveys. So in the metrics, we only had 26 responses for 999 and 27 for 111. They're quite small. I just wondered how reflective the wider experience and what we do to engage with patients to get into on that.
Shame Liam's not here, because I think he would be. You're quite right. It's way too small, really, to really generate any feeling. Although probably would agree with what some of those patients are saying. But I know there's a work, particularly around information governance as well, isn't it, to make sure we can contact patients and text people to get feedback more. So I don't know whether Estelle or Johnny wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm not close to this work, Hayley, but I understand there's been work going on with the ICO that allows us then, because when somebody rings 999, they don't give presumed consent to then use their data or their number to text them back or ring them back or whatever. So what we rely on is the surveys that are on our website, which are then driven through our systems. But inevitably, if you take the time to dig it out on the website, by and large, it's going to be because there's a gripe, rather than getting that feedback kind of in real time, or being able to dip sample, here's 100 patients who called us today. Let's take 50 of them randomly and see what their experience was. So I understand, to say Shane Leanne's gone because she's front and centre of this work, was to work with the Information Commissioner's Office to enable us to get that consent. I'm not sure of the mechanics of that, but that will then allow us to proactively approach patients who've been through either system, as opposed to rely on people coming to us, and inevitably then they're coming to us perhaps because they haven't had the best experience. That doesn't mean we're engineering it so that we get more positives. It's just more about being more representative and a bigger sample, so we can really understand what's going on. And also extrapolate it, I think, against, some of the stuff we heard today, patient experience stories, concerns, stuff that's coming through the media or political ether. If we can triangulate all that better, then we'll have a better sense of what is going on in terms of patient experience, I think.
And I think Johnny just wants to come in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, Johnny.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can't raise my hand on this mode on Teams.
Yeah,
so
just wave.
I'll wave
That's
at
it.
you when we come
Yeah.
to it. So we did discuss this just while I was off at the back end of January. We did bring this through our IG steering committee. So we've had that engagement with the ICO on this already. So we're content around the risk of doing this. Liam and I did sign this off as Siro and Caldecott Guardian just at the end of January. We were just going through some internal governance in regards to a data protection impact assessment. That's with the team. We're just in the closing stages of that. So we've moved this along quite a bit in the last couple of months. So I will get us an update for the next board meeting in full, but I can't see any reason why we can't be going live with the SMS type messages in the next couple of months. We're just in those final stages.
Great. Thanks, Johnny. That's really good news.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I remember being very involved in the ambulance sector in England around the family friends test, and actually the real difficulty there is of you call an ambulance and then you go, oh, can you fill in the FFT as it's called? It's like, would you refer us? Would you recommend us? It's like, well, I've just called an ambulance. So there's a bit, isn't there, about actually what are we measuring in terms of experience? When is the appropriate time to reach out with what questions? Right. Because there was a lot of debate in England where it said it is just not going to be appropriate to hand a format to somebody as they leave at the back of an ambulance to say, would you recommend us? So there are definitely ways to capture experiences, but I think we need to be mindful of the circumstances of some of our services.
Exactly.
Angela.
Okay. Oh, Angela.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking whether you could link in with the health boards using the Civica system so that patients get the link a couple of days later, whether you could link in, there could be a proportion of that if you arrive by ambulance and there's a set of questions. Whether you could link in with health boards, because that's an already ongoing system that's being used.
We do use Civica. So I suspect this is part of that. That would be how it would channel, that it would be channeled through. Am I right? Johnny's nodding here.
Good. Thanks, Angela. That's good. All right. There's a question of time. We're going to have a coffee break scheduled for actually 1 minute ago.
Good sharing.
Good sharing. Okay. But we'll defer it if you just bear with me, because we've got one more item on the MIQPR, which I don't think will be a long item. Probably we'll take our break. So stay with you. Stay with us to item 10.1.
Yes, thank you. So this is really a result of conversations we had at board development, etc. So, this has been discussed a number of times, but this is essentially the annual review we do of what metrics are the right metrics to be having at a board level. We know, and I've mentioned already, that subsequent to approving this set of board metrics, I and others will be meeting with committee chairs and committee directors to say what is the supplementary set of more granular metrics that each of the committees will look at. So that will go on. But they're really here today to be approved. They have gone around, a number of iterations, and you can see in the report, hopefully, how some of them link to, for example, the NHS performance framework, what our commissioners think. We've got feedback in there that NEDs and directors have given. So we've got a new set to be agreed. The bit, I suppose, that is give us some latitude, I suppose, as we continue to develop this. And this is the difference between an ambition and what we think performance is likely to be in the next year. Because some of the metrics here have got a sense of, this is where, ROSC is a good example. It's a long-term movement towards a quite significant change in our ROSC rates. We're unlikely to meet that this year. So we're trying to think, how do we frame that in the MIQB to say, we know we're heading towards 30%, say, but this year, what we're hoping to be able to do with the actions that we've got agreed in our plan is to get to X%, and here's the trajectory. So there's still, I think, a little bit of work to kind of really tease out the difference between a kind of long-term ambition and what we think is likely to be able to be achieved. And there are some metrics where actually our long-term ambition. So if we think about call out, we might really want to be, achieving a 5%. The reality is we're not going to be doing that for some considerable time. So there is a challenge, I think, and a tension in this, but what I'm looking for today, Chair, is a sense of these metrics. We've had discussions about how they will be presented, how they'll be used in committees, and we are trying to work through that sense of what's a coherent long-term ambition versus achievement in a year.
Indeed. And just to be clear, I suppose, to anybody watching these, the discussions on this topic have been going on for quite some time in lots of different places. So this is not a new discussion presented here for us to pore over. It is the summation of a lot of thinking that's gone on over a long period of time, and it's the formal governance process for us to say that we're concerned with it. So with that having been said, comments or questions, Kerry, and then do we have Jane first? I think Jane's hand might have shot up. Okay, so we go Jane and then go and then.
Won that little race, obviously. This morning. So, thanks to Rachel. As I say, it's been a long time in gestation, and I think some significant progress now. It's almost like in touching distance, isn't it? Which is really good. So, a couple of comments, a couple of questions from me. One was sort of just really reflecting on, I think, Emma's ambition earlier about the single pack. Absolutely with you on that, but don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're progressing and we're nearly there. I wouldn't want that held up by us wanting a single pack. So I know we will fine tune the nuances around that, because there are some slightly different nuances, but the set of data we've got, I'm sure, is going to be suitable for multiple parties in terms of that. Talked about ambition, Rachel, and I know I had, when I first read this, a little bit of discomfort around that, because it felt ambition a bit sort of hopeful. So I was thinking more about what is our intention, which has got a more purposeful drive to it. But I think ambition can be applied to some, which you highlighted, I think, really well there, and sort of said that's long term and a lot more out of our control. I think there's others there where we could have a firmer intention of where we want to go with them. So I think it's just making that subtle difference there. I did just quickly was over, and actually it came to me in a number of different forms, including at the PAM, and actually some of the numbers Emma mentioned earlier. I'm always quite struck by the volumes that we're dealing with. And is there an opportunity? We've got the set graphic, which is covered for a method, which talks about the number of calls coming in and the number of 999 for the type of ones. That for me is the front sheet for a bit of context. Let's get all these measures in context here, that actually this is the volume of work that we're dealing with. So is there an opportunity? The front sheet is that graphic, just, opportunities there. And then just sort of really a question mark for me. So these 36 that we're talking about are the vital few. I noticed sort of some of them perhaps is for discussion with the sort of committees, but there was sort of a couple where I felt perhaps might be more suited to committee. So for example, things around staff absence, for me, absolutely, we perhaps want to know at board level, but actually the implications and the sort of those follow-up elements would actually be perhaps more for people in performance committee. It's a bit like the finance. Absolutely, trust board needs to know where we are on balancing. The other measures we have, we talk about in FBC. So just perhaps looking again and teasing that out in the ongoing conversations with chairs, actually, which ones will fall to them. And then I think, my one particular question was around the average jobs per shift, which is number 26. I think we talk about, in fact, 26. Yeah. I think the ambition, talking about that is it 2.3? Mm-hmm. And I wonder whether is that an ambition, because I know we've had past conversations around that. So if we're talking about there's going to be hopefully a reduction in the number of the handover delays, the number of hours we're losing, actually, how does that then translate into the numbers of jobs that our paramedics, our EMS can attend to? So getting an idea of that through the stats. And really just my final question was really around what next, the steps and the timing. So you mentioned about engaging committee chairs, because it's like anything, I think once we see the visuals, I think it'll be really helpful. So just imagine the next pertinent steps.
Yeah, so thanks, Jane, for those comments. And there's a couple of things to take away there and have a look at. And thank you for sending, obviously, I've seen that sense of the volumes. And I know actually Lee and I have had that conversation before. The volume is sometimes actually a really important context and part of our understanding. So we'll have a look at those. In terms of steps and timing, so if we agree these metrics today, these will be in the board packs going forwards. We'd already previously agreed that for things that are green, all you get is the data. There'll be no narrative. We will be moving to much more use of SPC charts and also that sense of, not for all of them, I don't think it's possible for all of them, but where we can, a sense of, if this is if our intent or our belief is that with the actions we've got in place, performance will improve to this extent over the next 6 months. The trajectories that forward look that. So that will start from next board papers. The bit about what happens in committees then is going to take a look. We've got the meeting set up in April and through May. So the next round of committees will start coming back to say, here's the, are you happy with this set of more granular details? So sickness exactly, headline figure at board, much more detailed kind of analysis at a people and culture committee looking at different types of sickness or different staff groups, for example. So the deep dive going on in those committees. So that'll take a little bit longer.
Yeah. Thanks. So we've got Kerry, Emma, and then so Kerry.
Just very quickly, not question, just that I really welcome the approach. I think it's been a great piece of work. I was just a bit disappointed with the conversation on board development. Is just something maybe about timing next time, because we'd had a long session with the INPP, but I thought there would have been more dialogue there. So I'm hoping you got contribution in other ways. But I just welcome the approach and that top line at board and committees focusing on the detail that's relevant. So I just wanted to say thanks to you and the team.
Thank you. Mostly you. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So over to Emma, and then we'll circle back to Emma and draw this one to a close.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just continue on from what Peter said about the amount of work that's going on with the overruns, and it's significant, and really pleased with that. The only question I have in respect of the metrics, as you can see, trade unions have asked for this to be in the select few, being deferred to people and culture. Are we still comfortable that is going to be, it should not be in these key metrics? And I go, because the fact is probably the number one issue that the staff come to us about, and of course the impact on the patient, because obviously for every overrun, for a significant amount of staff take the toilet immediately the next day, and then we don't have a crew, so that impacts on the patient. So I just still wonder if that should be in the key.
I mean, we had a good conversation on this, didn't we, at WAST last week? So I think the rationale from our perspective is that the board will see the well-being of staff through sickness, through turnover. So that's the kind of board level outcome, I suppose, of all the things that we're doing to try and improve work experience for the experience of work for all of our people. And of course, while it is a massive issue for EMS, there'd be different issues for 111 staff and NEP staff. So what we did, my sense is that it being a key metric at the People and Culture Committee, I mean, people who go to the People and Culture Committee, it's a committee that really scrutinises and holds to account the organisation. And I think actually it will get a lot more airtime. I think it will get a lot of airtime there, and actually will ensure that assurance process gives you a sense that we're acting. So it's not the fact that it's a committee. People and Culture Committee metric doesn't mean it's lost at all. And that committee has then got the opportunity through the AAA to bring up to board if it remains concerned that actions aren't being taken and progress isn't being made. So that, I think, was the rationale. And I agree with you. I don't want to lose it as a metric that this organisation is focused on and concentrating on. And I hope in WAST, the presentation, we had a really good conversation, didn't we? And really good what teams are doing with you. So just assure you it's not lost at all. Yeah.
Good, thanks, Tim. So final comments, Emma?
Yeah, and I won't be long. Really grateful for everybody's contribution in this space, because it's been lots of work conducted. I suppose my final challenge will be, we set ourselves a challenge around IMR QPR should be the top things that we as a board need to look at that show us that we're delivering on our strategic objectives, but we're also mitigating risk. And we did say we wanted there to be fewer. There's now more. So if we look at finance as one financial metric, which is let's be in balance, and as I think Kerry or Peter, you said, or Jane, there's lots of other stuff there, agency, capital, there's loads that contribute into that, but we've taken the headline, which is financial balance. So I suppose my final challenge will be, is there anything in these 36 that we can say that's high level, and actually some of those can go into the committee? As we did say, we would focus on that which drives our strategy and that which mitigates our risk. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks so much. So look, I think what I suggest we do, we've asked to approve things, which is fine. But I think we're also reflecting that it's still iterative. That things will change. We need to implement this and then get the feedback from committee and committee chairs and from board to see whether it's all kind of coming together. So on that understanding, we're asked to approve the recommendations and the ambitions. So with the understanding that it's not set in stone, it's going to be an evolving issue. I think we're consented and make sure everybody's happy with that. Good. Well, that's very neat because it means we're going to take a 15-minute break, which will take us till 5:02. I'm going to hand the chair over to Kerry for about half an hour because I have to join a meeting with Welsh Government just for half an hour from 12. So, Kerry, chair is with you. The baton is passed.
Thank you.
I wish you well, and I shall rejoin you as soon as I'm released from duty.
Thank you, Chair.
I am released from duty.
Welcome to you.
Yeah, now.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. So the next item on our agenda is the IMTP for us to approve. So hand it over to you, Rachel.
Yes, thank you very much. This presentation of the paper is obviously a really important moment in the cycle for us. We've been working with colleagues across the organisation for a number of months really to articulate what the priorities are for us for the next 3 years, and I'm really pleased to be able to present this IMTP, which is a balanced IMTP, which really kind of looks to continuing the journey we've been on in terms of improving services to patients, but also for our staff. As I say, the plan has been discussed at a number of forums before this, so I'm not going to go through in huge amount of detail, but just to kind of, I suppose, bring out 2 or 3 key points if I could. The first, I just wanted to note that in the plan itself, we do take a look back at our achievements. And I think it's always really instructive to do that, because sometimes it's only when you look back you realise how far you've come. And in particular, I think, the plan that we set out last year, which was so ambitious in terms of changes to our clinical model transformation, but the journey as well in terms of people and culture was significant. And so we have got a section in here which just kind of pays tribute to those massive achievements that we've made. The second thing I just wanted to put out is that you'll see that we have made a really big effort this year to reduce down the number of deliverables for the organisation. And I know it's sort of similar to what Emma was saying before about the AI. I know Emma would prefer it to be lower than
13, it's magic number.
But we've gone from 160 deliverables last year to 47 this year. So that is a significant reduction in the things that the board will really concentrate on and which, as an executive team, will be kind of focusing on. That's not to say, and I think it is important to say, that some of the things that you'd have seen in last year's IMTP won't be continuing, because that will be part of directorate business and business as usual. And I don't want to forget the huge amount of work that kind of goes on outside of what's kind of articulated in this IMTP. So that's important. In terms of of what our priorities are, and we've touched on some of this in some of the other reports we've had today, but it really is a year of kind of consolidating, particularly around our clinical model. So we put in the large chunks of our new clinical model, and what we'll be spending the time, particularly over the first year, but across all 3 years, is embedding those and then reflecting on the data, what it's telling us, and making changes to that model where we need to get the benefits out. And aligned to that is the academic evaluation. I think that's a really important point, where we've got a great partnership now with Edge Hill and Swansea universities, who will be kind of rigorously scrutinising us in terms of the effectiveness of the model that we've developed. So that I suppose is a really important point. In terms of our people, we put in there slightly less specific commitments in terms of last year. If you remember, we did have some specific commitments around, for example, overruns. So they're slightly more high level than that, but a commitment through a huge amount of work in the People and Culture Directorate and with colleagues across corporate directorates to continue to improve workplace experience for our people. I think we'll come on in a minute to the financial, and Chris will talk to us a little bit about the financial context, but the plan is accompanied by a QIA and EQIA. So we've done that analysis of the impacts and there are no major concerns to be pulled out, which is good. And I suppose before we come on to the financial element, I just wanted to say that, and I know Hannah's not here today, but one of the comments we often get is this is a very large document, it's not particularly necessarily easily readable for the public or for our staff. And so one of the today is outline the work that we're doing to create some documents that will be more accessible. And one of the things we do want to do today, if that's okay, is to get board's approval to start using some of those easy to read documents, even though we know Welsh Government are unlikely to approve our plan for some time. We want to get some of those messages out if we can. So I'm just going to hand over before I finish then to Chris, who's just going to talk us through the financial element of the plan.
Thanks, Rachel. So just briefly then, the narrative document has got a couple of paragraphs in it, as it obviously would, but the main details in Appendix 9 then, in terms of the detailed narrative that supports the financial plan. Hopefully, when you saw that, there wasn't anything particularly of a surprise in it from what you've seen, and hopefully we've kept you fairly close to me in terms of the development of it. I know it was run through my absence at F&P last week as well, which is helpful. But just the key headlines within it. As we know, there's the 1.11% funding uplift applied to all our income streams, as being confirmed and supported by our commissioners and others in that sense. We've got the estimated costs of the 26-27 pay award, with the equal opposite assumed funding from government for the A4C pay award 3.3%. And again, that in national discussions has continued to be confirmed to be the plan and assumption that we make within the plan. And then we've got a range of cost pressures, impacts as we've described, which when you put all that into the mix results in a financial challenge or gap for the year before any savings of 9 million, of which we have identified and are able to set within the budgets. And I'll come back to the budget setting beyond this in the next item to follow. A value of 7.8 million. So we have still got this residual 1.2 million that we kind of had and draw the line under, if you like, from a planning perspective a couple of weeks ago now in terms of the plan, just to close as we go through the year, with all the narrative around then how we're going to continue to work on that through Q1, Q2 as we go through the year. A number of variables in this will change as planned. The actuals be different. You know, the variables will come through, and we'll hopefully have got confidence that that's at a level that we will manage in year and doesn't prevent us from presenting this as a balanced financial plan at this stage of the budget. We'll set, as I say in a sec, we'll come back to follows on from that. There's just one or two very quick things I just wanted to flag, and including probably a couple of or one or two small additions to the narrative that you've currently got that I'm hoping to get the board's agreement to include in the final submission. The one coming back in now this week, I've both through and with the team and others, is that I want to probably be a little bit more explicit around risk in terms of, particularly given the current events around costs, particularly to energy and fuel. Going forward, and that's obviously started to have a short-term impact in the very back end of the current financial year, which I'll come on to when we do that month 11 position in a minute. But I could argue that it was probably covered off because we had some general sort of assumptions and risks built into the narrative around, the plan is based on the current estimates of cost being no more than what they currently are or whatever. But given that, as I said, I do just want to pull out, and so what I proposed, I'll just read this very quickly, is in the risk section. Just a further bullet point, basically, that says, given the recent geopolitical events, etc., through the last couple of months, or a few weeks or so, and in particular the impact on market prices for fuel and energy, managing these within resources currently available assumed within this plan will likely to become a challenge should these levels continue well into the new financial year. And what I've put it as an example, and the biggest single impact on us is probably going to be on fuel, less so than energy, and that's probably across NHS Wales as well, because at the minute, a lot of the energy for 26-27 has already been pre-bought across the NHS in Wales. Probably about 80% of next year's energy is already fixed in terms of price. So the current movement in price is only going to have a big impact should it continue, and it will kick in towards the back end of the year, but only at a lesser level in 26-27. I've got a bit, this continues on, and still at this point, this time next year, it will have a massive impact for 27-28, but for 26-27, that's a lesser impact. Clearly, the one that does impact on us significantly straight away up front, if you like, is the cost of fuel. I just put an example in that, a 10% increase in the cost of fuel at the pumps results on average in an increase of about £33,000 a month for us. So just a 10% movement is about 400k a year. Now, I think in the last few weeks, we probably had 25, 30 or so pence sort of shifts, particularly in diesel. 178, I noticed this morning at Malpas driving down. So, that was like 130 when I went away 2 weeks ago. where's it going to end? So that's just, so I'm not suggesting we can't quantify anything else at this stage in terms of cost or, impact or necessarily how we would manage it. But I thought we need to flag that specifically as an additional risk. Be very clear what our assumptions are, and that, other than the contingency we hold to cover off some elements of in-year spend, we haven't got anything else to impact on that. But obviously, whilst fuel it hits us a little bit more than others, we're all in the mix of that across everybody, isn't it? In terms of NHS Wales and beyond, particularly on the energy elements. So I just wanted to flag that, and would include that extra bit of narrative in the final version. And obviously keep an eye on it as we go through, and hopefully things will start to improve sooner rather than later in that context. A couple of other things then which have developed a little bit over the last couple of weeks. Alongside the 9 million, the 3% broadly cash releasing savings plan that we need to deliver on to balance, as I say, of which we got 7.8 covered off in the plan at the minute, and the budgets that we'll set and our balance to work through, which, as I say, I'm pretty confident we will do so. The other discussions with commissioners and others has been around sort of quantifying an impact beyond that, if I describe it as that. I'm trying not to use the word savings in this, so it's a productivity impact. I think we need to not use the word productivity saving, because it's not a cash releasing saving, but it is an impact, a positive impact on delivering improvements in productivity. Whether that be handover delays, whether that be in NEPs, whether that be whatever we want to describe. And you can see in the core document, there's a table with some initial metrics that could be hanged to that around, which we can then put a notional, nominal sort of value to financial value, which at the very least could be described that if we didn't make those savings, if we didn't make those impacts, we would have additional spend potentially, or there certainly would be a negative cost impact of not doing that. So doing them will result in a productivity gain, productivity impact, and kind of positive impact collectively to us. And as I say, we need to work with commissioners, we need to work with partners to deliver on some of that. Some of that will be in our control. Obviously handover delays clearly is a bit of it. There's some work there which we're progressing with our commissioners around quantifying and presenting some of that. And it's a means by which we've got agreement through our commissioners that the 9 million, the 3% sort of cash releasing is the level that we will be expected to deliver on, and currently no further expectations. Again, it's flagged as a risk in the plan that there's always an in-year potential that we could be asked for more. As it currently stands, we're not being asked for any more cash releasing in that way, but we are being asked, and we'll work with commissioners to work through that improvement in other metrics that result in productivity gains, which we can attach a financial impact towards. So that's something that's sort of further worked on over the last few weeks, and we're getting to a good place, I think, with some of the commissioners on that. And the last one, just briefly then, is for the couple of areas that we've agreed with commissioners that, whilst we're describing them, and they are, unavoidable costs in the context of the way in which we built the plan up and have recognised them within it. They are new costs that are going to hit in this year. And there has been, some debate with commissioners about, the level of which we recognise, are able to recognise with the uplift that we got, the savings that's achievable to deliver beyond that, and the choices we got in some of that. And we'll be well aware of some of the choices within all of that we're saying that we can't recognise in the plan, and things we can't progress as a result. And we've reversed them a number of times in the detail is within. There were a couple which we are recognising. Some of the element of the outstanding recommendations in relation to the Manchester Arena, and some of the additional work we want to continue around the new clinical response model. But what we're having to do now with commissioners is just work up a little bit of narrative with them. I don't know if business case has been used as a term, but it's not a business case in the normal sense of the word. It's a correspondence of agreement or something like that, if you want to describe it. That we will document that with commissioners and get a response back from them that they support us in the choices that we make to recognise those elements, in particular those two elements within our plan, in the way that we have. So that was that for now. I'll come back in a little bit of detail, not much more, but when we get on this, a separate budget setting paper as the next bit, Kerry. But Rachel, that's all I wanted to say in terms of the detailed financial plan element at this stage. But obviously, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, and then I was just going to kind of follow up, I suppose, Kerry, on that JCC context, just to kind of confirm that Emma and I presented to the JCC a couple of months ago in January. I presented further in Emma's absence last week, and that has generated a lot of conversation. Emma has had correspondence from their Chief Commissioner, Hugh George, at the weekend, and spoke to him again, I think, on Monday. And whilst we haven't got the letter of support, we will get, I think, there's an understanding that our plan as currently set out will be supported by them. So we will get a letter of support to include within this submission to Welsh Government. And I think just in that context, I just wanted to note, I suppose, the really difficult position that health boards find themselves in other parts of the health system. I think, the fact that we're able to deliver a 3-year balanced plan is unusual in the setting, in the context of the rest of the health system, who are really struggling with very large sums of savings they have to find and potentially not able to balance their plans. So we do understand, as we're commissioned by health boards, that is a difficult position that they find themselves in, and we are very open, I suppose. We've been very open with them about, the potential for those productivity gains, which help them as commissioners and as providers, and being open to further conversations with them, as we go into next year. So I just wanted to recognise that the difficulty that other people find in developing these plans across Wales. So my last couple of points, I suppose, one was at the end in the covering paper. We've got a series of questions, which I think we posed at Finance Performance Committee, which is, as the board approves this plan, it's a sense of, are you comfortable as a board that it's aligned to our long-term direction, that it's both ambitious but also deliverable, that it's got a credible financial plan, that it's really taking note of patient outcomes and our staff well-being as well, that it recognises and mitigates risk, and that there's been an appropriate level of engagement with our stakeholders. So that's kind of, I guess, what the ask is. And my very final point is just kind of a really big thanks, because firstly to colleagues from every single directorate, there's been an awful lot of bottom-up work in the development of this plan. Actually, there's been a lot of discussions in directorate meetings, workshops with trade union partners, and there's a lot of time that goes into the development of these plans and the savings plans. So a huge thanks to everybody across the organisation who's contributed, but particularly, and I know we can't see them now, but James and Helen from my team, who kind of lead the development of this plan. They're both new in post this year. It's been quite a disruptive period in terms of the planning team, with people getting promotions and moving on elsewhere. So they have stepped in really brilliantly, and if many people across my team have stepped in to do things that aren't quite part of their portfolio. But so a massive thanks to them for all their leadership in getting us to this point. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions, as Chris said as well.
Okay, thanks both. So can I just ask Jane to comment from an F&P perspective before I bring anyone else in? Are you happy with that? Do you put your hands for it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you, Kay, because I just thought it's an opportunity, because this is the one alert that's in the AAA, obviously from FPC, an alert, but actually substantial reassurance, I think, for board in terms of that. So I'm reviewing the AAA in these comments. So in terms of, as Rachel said, we looked at those 6 key questions, which I think are really helpful way of looking at what does approval really mean in that context, and all things that we looked at. And FPC really did appreciate and commend the work and the time of Rachel's team, not least my love of the way they matrix all the requirements and what people need to tick. Recognise obviously the streamlining of the 47 focus priorities, but more importantly, board may want to note that we did discuss the areas not being progressed in 26 and 27 to understand the clear rationale for that and the appropriate impact assessments, and also the comms and the stakeholder engagement and management that's needed around that. We certainly recognise the engagement particularly strong this year, I think, from a wider group of execs and non-execs. So in one way that made our job easier, I think, in FPC, at March, reflecting on the previous March. And I think we did flag around the opportunity, I think, to refine the plan on the page. So recognising the very detailed plans on the page that included it in the report. So we very much welcome the opportunity to actually condense those even further and potentially link those with the strategic objectives. So I think that goes back to how Hannah raised that, I think, in APC originally. One or two other things from me was around how do we know that we're meeting our strategic objectives? Obviously, we've got the deliverables underneath that, and we'll be reporting on those 47. But are there a couple, 2 or 3 measures against each strategic objective? Where's a measure or reflection that we know that we're on track for meeting that strategic objective during the year, and not least at the end of the year? And my final point was really around, I was rather curious on seeing the note about the JCC meeting, but I think, Chris, you've answered that in terms of the requirement for business plans. Because I reflected and I thought, well, we have a governance structure here for WAST that is robust, and we use that to look at those. So what is JCC's sort of role in that? But I think it's a slightly different lens. So appreciate that you will be navigating that diplomatically, but recognising that it won't undermine the governance that we already do.
Yeah, if I may, one of the conversations I had with the lead commissioner this week was we need to be really clear about the lines of accountability here between us as a statutory organisation and what our health board chief execs and commissioners actually ask of us. And in fact, we're not making an investment in those things. We're saving money in order to do them. And we're doing one of them, at least, the Manchester Arena, because it's our civil contingency requirement. We've talked about it many times in board around actually we need to do more. Can't continue to wait for Welsh Government or the commissions to give us money. We're waiting for the magic tree that's not going to give us anything. So it was in that conversation then that the shift was slightly, actually, it's not a business case. Just give us a 2-page letter. And then there's a piece of work that I'll do with Trish because we will have a new lead commissioner in the summer, because the current JCC commissioner is retiring. What work do I need to do with that new individual around what was comfortable and not comfortable this year, and what do we need to do differently to make sure that we don't have people marking homework for us which actually doesn't require them to. So it's that balance, isn't it, as to what's the commissioning relationship versus what do we need to get on and just do because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. So Lee, I think Lee, Angela, then Peter. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I more of, I think, just a comment for me that I just feel I want to set out is that, of course, in creating this plan, achieving a plan with the ambition of financial balance has not been easy for us. And it's already required some difficult decisions. And I think it's important to be clear that those decisions have been around reallocation of funds internally for us as an organisation. And that absolutely supports that we can't sustain the way that services have been delivered in the past going forward. So it adds further weight, I think, to the transformation journey that we're on, which now becomes not just one of needing to be one that reduces harm, but also one that has financial sustainability, because we can't just carry on doing what we've been doing. The concern that I just want to note, however, is that we as an organisation are, of course, continuing our ability to provide a financially balanced plan and hopefully achieve financial balance. And what I'm concerned about is that makes us appear as though we are, in our system, potentially easy pickings to go further. And I just wanted to re-emphasise on the record that to achieve this year's plan has already required a number of very difficult decisions that are required, movement of internal funds, and that actually stretching further than we have already needed to go this year, particularly because we are continuing a year of continuing the trend of additional savings, I think would be very challenging for us. Just the statement, Chair.
Really
Thank you.
important point. Thank you for making that, Lee. Angela.
Thank you. My comments around the non-emergency patient transport, and forgive me for coming back to a comment that you made earlier, Lee, but I wanted to raise it all here really. So in relation to patients, asking patients to rebook their appointments. So one of the top things people are saying to us at the minute, they're waiting too long for their appointments. So your comment really earlier was quite concerning, and I can imagine patients would be quite concerned about having to wait even longer for their appointments to get to their appointment. Just wanted to say that. But coming back to the IMTP, I see that there's some details in there around changing the criteria of how who uses that service, and I know we've had conversations around that. So I'd be really keen to see what that new criteria looks like. But just a reminder, really, that any change of criteria that means that Mr. Jones suddenly wouldn't be able to access that transport would be a service change, and obviously would require following Welsh Government guidance for engagement and possibly consultation.
Thank you. Can I point? Yeah.
So the changes that we're making are within our gift to make with the criteria that's been set. And we're just having a conversation at the moment yesterday around, because JCC have said they want to engage with yourself. So we're checking with JCC, well, is it you or is it us or is it both of us? Who is it? Because we don't want to obviously duplicate. I think that's the first thing to be really clear of, is the things that we will change, we can change within our gift. The more strategic piece is that we believe that the criteria requires a relook by Welsh Government. We expect that is not going to be a priority, but the fact that the criteria hasn't been changed in the last 20 years and more people are entitled to access a service where the demands and capacity simply don't meet, means that, unless there's going to be a massive injection of cash, which we're not going to get when we look at the overall NHS Wales deficit position, we need to do something different. And I think that's the conversation we want to have with the JCC and Welsh Government then around, we just need to do something different because this isn't working. We're not the same demographics as we were 20 years ago. So hopefully that assures you.
Yeah, I completely accept, the world has changed and sometimes you do need to change things. It's just the effects that has on the people. We need to think about that. And the JCC hasn't been in touch with me to have a conversation, but I really welcome a conversation about what that looks like. So thank you.
We'll make sure that's done.
And I think from my perspective, it's about ensuring we protect the service that for those
most in need.
Yeah. And I know sitting with some of the planners and the people that are making calls, it's a really difficult job. So if we can make sure that the resource we've got is absolutely ring fenced, that those need it most in line with the guidance, the eligibility criteria, I think, we absolutely need to do that. But as you say, to follow due process.
Yeah. Thank you.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. I got two general points and then some specifics, mainly on the finance. The general points, just wanted to endorse the great team effort that's gone on. This started way before Christmas, and we were talking potentially about not balancing budgets and all the challenges. So we've got, from there to where we've got now with a balanced budget, recognising the challenges is no mean feat. So well done to everybody. The consequence of that, as Lee has alluded to, and this came up in ARAC, predominantly in the corporate resources context, is managing best endeavours within the existing resources and a recognition across the board that the gold plate stuff we currently do may not be achievable. Yeah. So it's a cultural understanding piece. Kerry, you're right in terms of making sure the targeted highest risk areas get the resources, but there may need to be a shift in expectations of what's delivering in a shrinking financial environment. I think that's key as well. The specific points, largely picking up on what Chris has said, I think to manage within a 1.1% increase is no mean feat. It's not a big increase when you've seen the challenges that we've got. In terms of the 9 million, the 3%, certainly I've every confidence that having already identified 7.8 isn't giving us undue risk of not finding the residual 1.2, because the track record we have within the trust is that that's been demonstrated in the past that it is achievable. I don't think there's any risk there. I think two important points are pushing the boat out further in terms of the 2% for non-cash releasing efficiency savings. That's a really, really important piece of work. as is the stuff we're not doing. It's clear in the report here, but for example, not doing any further development of the 111 digital front end. I guess a plea is that we communicate that to our partners so everybody's of the same understanding of what we're not going to do as much as what we are going to do. And my final point, which again, as Chris has covered off, is the implications of the geopolitical. I had a quick look in here. I know you've got 1.1 million in across the board next year for non-pay inflation, and you've got 1 million contingency. But from what you said, and adding that addendum, Chris, it seems, although it's going to be challenging, I don't think we need to worry about changing the figures or increasing the contingency. I think you've flopped it.
What it could mean, for example, it could wipe out a good chunk of the contingency, and which we would then not have any other in-year impacts or things which sometimes with the contingency, frankly, we tried to do some stuff ahead of the following year in the last quarter with or something. We wouldn't be able to do any of that, would we? So, but no, I agree. I think, I'm not unduly sort of high risk at this stage in that context because of what we have got in there, but I needed to flag, I think, and specifically draw out what we have got in there, what we haven't got in there, and what some of those impacts might end up being.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, except sorry, Karen. I'm hopelessly chairing this session.
No, not
Colin's going to come back and we're having lunch at 2. No. I'll be very quick. Commending the work that's been done. It has surprised me at how much the Welsh Government wants for the 3-year plan, that every year we're updating the 3-year plan. And I mean, what we see here is what we're required to provide. It seems pretty exhaustive amount of work, but I commend that. I just wanted to make a couple of points. I think Lee's point about us being in financial balance is a credit to this board, but it has carried and does carry a risk. And certainly when we've been in with the JCC meetings, myself and Rachel, it hasn't necessarily been commended. It's almost a bit like, well, can't you go further then if you're always in balance? So, and that shouldn't change how we fiscally manage our organisation, because we accept the statutory responsibility we have and we hold firm to it. And I welcome that. But I think we do need to recognise that this year, and I want to really make this quite public, is that corporate have borne the greatest sit that they have ever had. Our corporate teams will be smaller. Our corporate teams will not be able to offer gold. We have chosen as an executive team and a board in this plan to protect frontline as best we can. And when 80 to 85% of our budget is in that core, we have to be realistic that as we go further over the next few years, that's where we're going to have to go, because we'll have exhausted everywhere else. So I just want to sort of really make sure that that's sort of crystal sort of clear and being transparent about it. How we sustain this level of work is a concern for me as a chief exec. 4 months of our time have been spent on this financial plan, on the savings plan, on the IMTP. We're going to have to repeat it next year. So I am thinking now about what can we do differently? I don't know the answer. How can we do it differently? Because it was really quite exhausting to do this piece of work. Recognising as well that this year, not only have we got to deliver all of the savings, but we're going to have to think about service transformation and service review, which is what Lee's articulated for 27-28. We're going to have to do things very differently. We're going to have to work out what that is this financial year to land it at the start of the next financial year. So I'm just conscious that this is going to probably feel quite difficult for quite a number of months. But I'm glad I've got the team around me that I do, because they've been absolutely tremendous.
Thank you. So just a couple of closing comments from me, I guess, is that, just to echo, to commend all the work that's been done. It just feels like an industry. And I do wonder around our expectations for next year. This may be, I don't know, something that F&P could think about, but, what are we looking for as well as a board year on year, in addition to what JCB and other key stakeholders are going to want from us. So for me, the positioning around the 6
strategic priorities is really important, as is the work around the risk and the risk tolerance statements. It feels that, from a governance perspective, we're streamlining this in a more effective and efficient way, which should help with scrutiny and assurance. So I really welcome that. I was a little bit nervous about losing what does good look like. And I think that goes back to James' point around you can have the metrics and how we talk about it as well. So, and I think it will be okay, but because we've lost those statements, we need to be more intentional in that space. And then I think just the whole volatility, just the fuel points, and going back to your point, Emma, around it being really challenging, I think there is just something for us as a board and as committees, how we hear about that.
Yeah.
So if, Colin and I were talking about the overtime ban a few days ago, and the impact of that really worries me. And when we talk to crews and staff, and that's landing out with our staff as well. So we don't want to lose the impact of that. So how do we hear about that in a way that's meaningful? I think for me, there's that dependency on our system partners around, STEPs and six goals and single point of access. And that just all feels quite volatile. Yeah. So I think it's just how do we keep an eye on it? But I think it's in terms of how it's presented to us today and all the work that's gone into it. I just think it's a great piece of work. So I just want to say thank you for that. So can I check that we're all happy to approve?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So,
Chair, I'm sorry. It was just to follow up on a bit of language that you used.
Not an overtime ban.
Yeah. No, there's not a ban on overtime. I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. That's a really interesting point for me, the process, because that's
we
the
can,
narrative.
I can bring you up to speed. I just wanted to.
We're calling me out on it. So let's also.
I think what we've done is we rebalance budget according to what has been spent in the past, which will make budget smaller, but it's based on profiling of how much you needed. So in the past, WAST would be, I got £10, I didn't spend £10, I get £10 next year. This year it's, I got £10, I spent none. So guess what? This next year I've got none, which is a very typical financial. So there's definitely not an overtime ban.
Great. Okay. So I just want to, I'll hand back to you in a sec, Colin. Sorry, we haven't got very far. But it's all good. It's all good. So Chris, did you want to come back to the...
Yes, on the budget setting paper, yes, if I can very quickly.
Yes,
Chairs, if I can, please,
yes.
Thank you.
We do, yeah.
So just then, as a completely directly impacted agenda item, but important for it from an audit and governance perspective for it to be a separate agenda item. 11.2 in your pack is the paper that provides the initial revenue budget for 26-27, which I'm asking the board to also approve today separately to the IMTP before the 1st of April next week. Now, only things I was just going to very briefly highlight within that, inevitably, it builds on the detailed financial plans in the IMTP. So therefore, there's quite a bit, but it'll be a standalone paper in its own right. And from an audit perspective, it's got quite a bit of duplication in terms of the build up, the background, the assumptions, the risks and everything are very similar. But there's two things it does in particular. One, it probably, if I describe it this way, it grosses things up a bit more than the financial plan does. The financial plan's got a table in it which does at the end describe the gross values, the total values. But the financial plan is much more iterative, if you like. It's the increase in next year in terms of income, the increase in spend, the increase in savings requirements, whereas this then lumps that on top of the baseline, the current values to give the total values for next year. So you see the total income values, the total expenditure values and everything a little bit more clearer in that budget setting paper. So that's the one thing it clearly has to do, because that's the basis on which we balance it. We don't just do one view iterative increase. So that's the one thing I just wanted to point out, because I say a lot of it provides a bit more granular detail then in terms of breaking down income lines and the like. The final thing then I just wanted to flag was obviously what it then needs to do, and now we need to manage it as we go through the year. from a ledger and reporting through perspective is to identify all the elements that are in that iterative plan to the individual dedicated budgets and impact them on top of the recurrent rollover, as I say, that we will be doing on the ledger now in the next few weeks once we get through this year's year end. So there's an appendix 2 that gives an initial indication of what that could look like, and I would describe it like that because inevitably, as we've described, this has been drafted for a couple of weeks now and things still are moving a little bit in terms of delivering and balancing down to that. So there will probably be some further update to some of that split of elements of that iterative increase, whether that be costs or savings that we'll work through. Any changes from that which is currently proposed in this paper for approval will be fully documented, will come through in the report for next year, will be part of myself and Emma now will set up one-to-ones in the first quarter of the year with each individual director to formally delegate their budgets to them from an audit requirement perspective for the directors to sign them off. But it doesn't the update to it will probably be more to back to Emma's point just now, further as much as we can, we can't 100% do this, but as much as we can, hold on to that approach that we have got within the overall plan in terms of the bottom line numbers and everything work through of a 5% impact on all of the corporate budgets. Where possible, that's the way it will then go through the whole budget setting. There may be a couple of small nuances or tweaks to it, which we need to amend, but nothing significant. So that was the only other thing I just wanted to flag was, as I say, this is at a point in time still iterative in some ways, but it's an initial budget, and the variations from what's in there are not material in that context in the overall. So nothing will prevent us from hopefully approving this formally today. Now was we need to do before the 1st of April as per our SFIs. Like I say, any amendments to it, and they will always be changed to budgets in years. We go through the year, more money coming in, things changing and everything anyway. But we document and update them through our reporting, in particular through to F&P.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. And this isn't a surprise to us. The lines we're, as a board, we're aware of, aren't we? So can I just check that we're all happy to approve the 26-27 revenue budget? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Rachel. Back to you, Chair.
Back to me. Okay. The staff of control has been passed back. Thank you. Right, item 12.
And then I think it comes back to me, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it does. Although what I'm going to suggest is that, this is month 11. It's a bit historic now. It's almost too late to influence the month 12.
We got 5 days yet.
Got 5 days.
We spent per day. I don't know.
So I wonder whether, if everybody's content, we can take the papers read and go to any questions.
Can I just add one thing?
Of course.
You're absolutely right. I was going to say almost exactly the same. It's month 11.
Yeah.
This is a write-up of the presentation that went to F&P last week, so F&P have already cited on that a little bit earlier in the month. It always comes, about 3 weeks or so into the month anyway. And obviously at the end of the year, that gets exaggerated, doesn't it? Because you've already got a couple of days of the year to go. The one thing I did want to flag was the capital. So we focus on revenue. From my own perspective, we focus on revenue a lot, obviously. So I just wanted to just spend a minute just focusing on the capital element with it. And to note, isn't it, is like, calling it out, the figures are there, that we are going to, presentationally at least anyway, and from an accounting perspective, spend 20 million of our 32 million capital in the last month of the year. And that's not, an untypical, it's not quite as clear cut as that, because that's not cash transactions. A significant element of our capital spend that we will put into the accounts for 25-26 will be accruals at the end of the year for things that are continuing to capital spans more than one financial year, obviously, in lots of ways. So there's a lot of accruals that will go into. But I did just want to call that out to provide the assurance that, and I was going to say, actually, I love this time of the year, isn't it? So not only have we just spent all this time focusing on the plan for next year and the budget setting for next year, but obviously clearly we haven't landed this year yet. This year's not, 25-26 isn't finished yet. We have got a few days to go. And in particular, focus and the timing over the next week or 10 days in particular with the team is predominantly going to be initially on landing that capital position, because that's more cash based. The revenue position will follow through then through the early couple of weeks of April, which does get impacted a lot more around provisions and accruals and the like. But because the cash base element of capital, that's the one that really needs that almost hourly daily landed over the next couple of weeks, right up to literally almost probably midnight on the 31st of March. And believe me, that position currently is varying daily, and not by millions, but by tens and hundreds of thousands, probably, based on that impact that we have of capital. As I say, a lot of what we include in the year and will book up to the 31st of March will be, for example, work in progress on vehicles that we still have in our vehicle converters. And just a change in programme and plan by a converter by a couple of days could make a couple of £100,000 difference on that. So be assured we're well used to this, we're well versed in it, we do it every year, we deliver it, we got contingencies, we got offsets and everything that we can use. But it's one was to provide that assurance, because if you read that code, there's an awful lot of capital to be spent in the last month of the year. But I say it's not quite spend in the context of what it might look otherwise be. But I just want to flag that capital bit of it, particularly given where we are, and we've got the next 4 or 5 working days that will really sort of land some of that. So I agree, Colin. Apart from that, there's not an awful lot to probably add to the position. We're going to balance from a revenue perspective. And we're going to balance pretty much on the nose, I hope, from a capital perspective. I just want to give that a little bit of airtime to capital, because we don't really do that in this paper generally anyway. It's mainly the focus on the revenue position.
Thank you very much, Chris. Anything you want to add, Peter?
Chris has answered that question. It's just a general well done. I mean, we're almost there at the year end. Just to reiterate what Chris said, there's an awful lot of work that goes on, largely unseen, but to get that balance, I've always likened it to a jumbo jet landing on a postage stamp. We always do it, but we shouldn't underestimate what work goes in to ensure that. It's not always seen, but I think we should have a call out to everybody who's working around the clock, probably this time of the year, as Chris has said, to make sure from a capital and a revenue perspective, it's really good financial management. A lot of it is unseen, but I think, well done to everybody. And I think the board is confident that we are once again going to come out on balance. So well done.
Indeed. For umpteenth year in a row, which is very well done. And it's more difficult as every year goes by. Okay, any final questions to Chris on period 11? Thank you very much. So we due to note various things like that, which we duly do. Item number 13 then is similar. It's looking at the progress to the integrated business plan for the year we're in, which we're almost out of. So again, I wonder in time that whether we can also just ask Director maybe to the headlines you might want to make in August if there are any questions on it.
I think actually I don't particularly want to bring anything through yet other than to note that this is a kind of a mid-quarter actually, because this is a bit like we were talking earlier, this is every 2 months this meeting, and we try and do quarterly updates, so it's a slightly old update. But I didn't want to flag anything particular. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions on progress today? We monitor this, of course, month by month, so there's no surprises in here, and we are coming towards the end of the year where we've done a huge amount in terms of meeting our IMT plans. Conversation I just had with Welsh Government was reflecting that.
Colin,
High levels of confidence.
Right, just F&P would already have reviewed this. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody content then to take that. The note. Yep. So we know that. Good. In that case, let's move on to item number 14. Actually, another good news story, really, I think, in terms of culture and staff surveying what it's telling us. So over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Colin. And we do have Sarah Davis on the call.
Yes, we do indeed.
Sort of position. As Emma and Colin referenced earlier, we're really delighted with our NHS staff survey participation rates and overall engagement scores, which improve. However, we are not complacent. To supplement the board paper that you have today, Sarah will lead a very short presentation, which will bring the results to life. There'll be an opportunity after her presentation for you to make any initial comments, but to just give the board a level of assurance, there will be a far greater scrutiny at May's People and Culture Committee. So over to you, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm seeking to answer some key questions for you around the data today, namely what's improved, what's deteriorated, what's the data telling us, and what's next. Firstly, then, we saw a 22.7% increase in our response rate compared with last year, And when we compare that with our 2023 response rate, this year's figure equates to an 81.5% increase, which is pretty significant. A particularly positive signal in this year's results is the increase in the engagement index. That's gone up from 65.8% to 67.3%, especially when we view that alongside the significant rise in participation. Higher response rates can sometimes lead to scores falling slightly as a broader range of experiences are captured, and it's particularly positive given the pressures that our colleagues are facing. Now, whilst we can't directly attribute the rise in engagement to any single factor, the results suggest that our ongoing people and culture work is supporting a more engaged workforce. We've seen increases in positivity scores across all of the themes in the survey this year, with the greatest increases associated with patient safety and speaking up themes, again suggesting growing confidence in safety culture and psychological safety. Our most significant positive shift is evident in responses to the statement, "I will probably look for a job at a new organisation in the next 12 months, with positivity scores increasing by 5.88%, indicating reduced intention to leave. And that's reinforced by a 4.95% increase in colleagues reporting that they're satisfied in their current role and intend to remain in it for the foreseeable future. And linked to that, pride in working for the organisation has risen by 2.18%, and willingness to recommend the organisation as a place to work has also increased by 1.15%. And as we've already seen, these shifts sit alongside an overall increase in engagement score, suggesting that improved retention is occurring as part of a broader strengthening of connection, motivation and commitment. And it's important to acknowledge that external economic conditions may influence perceived mobility, but that alignment across engagement, pride, advocacy, role satisfaction, it indicates that the trend is more likely reflective of growing organisational attachment. At question level, positivity increased across the majority of measures, with declines in just a few. And the biggest negative shift this year was in relation to the statement, "Relationships at work are strained." The change itself is modest, so a 1.92% reduction in positivity scores and a 2% increase in negativity. When we consider that alongside strong positivity in areas relating to team dynamics, willingness to help colleagues, compassion, etc., the data suggests that strain may not primarily sit within immediate team relationships. It might be reflecting pressure points in wider working relationships, for example, across teams or between managerial layers. We've also seen a slight deterioration in relation to the number of colleagues reporting having experienced unwanted behaviour of a sexual nature in the workplace, whether that be from patients or from colleagues. This year, fewer colleagues reported that they'd never experienced such incidents. So small percentage shifts, but behind those percentages, the reality is that 345 respondents experienced at least one such incident from patients, and 185 experienced this from colleagues. We have continued to focus on sexual safety as a key priority, but the results show that incidents are still occurring. Our focus on fear of detriment may address this, plus the work we're doing to embed the anti-sexual harassment policy. But key takeaway, still more to do in this space. In terms of what the data is telling us, it suggests that our focus on people, culture, colleague experience, it is helping, but there's still much more to do. Some key areas of strength are evident in that colleagues report feeling trusted to do their job, able to ask other members of their team for help when they need it, and they're clear about their work responsibilities. They remain happy to go the extra mile, and they're positive about their teams. Responses do, on the other hand, reinforce that well-being and burnout remain critical concerns. They're showing a clear impact on personal life, with 38% of respondents reporting that they never or rarely have enough energy for family or friends. There's also an ongoing struggle with workload and presenteeism, and alongside this, many colleagues continue to report not feeling involved in decisions about changes that affect their work. With regard to next steps, we've got further engagement and cascade planned, including workshops with exec colleagues and trade union partners, plus an update at WAST Live. We'll be analysing the data in more detail and preparing directorate level reports to ensure local insights can drive meaningful local action. Qualitative data is due to be released to us shortly, and following that we'll undertake thematic analysis, ready to explore key themes and agree priority areas of organisational focus. We've asked colleagues to speak up and they have, so the focus for the coming year must be on systematically using this evidence to inform decision making, prioritisation and organisational improvement, ensuring that colleague voice meaningfully influences how we shape services, support our workforce and deliver our strategic objectives. It's encouraging to see that the people and culture priorities we've articulated in the IMTP are clearly reflected in what this data is showing and what our people are telling us, which provides a level of reassurance that we're focusing on the right areas to make a meaningful difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. As always, very, very clear and very straightforward. Thank you. Andy, you want any more? So, what have you got? Terry, looks like she's poised.
Yeah, well, as chair of people and culture, I just thought I'd reflect on a couple of points. I mean, the level of engagement is really positive, isn't it? And it's good that we've seen some of our scores going in the right direction, but we can't be complacent. I think some of these numbers around 44% experience of use at work. People don't feel safe to speak up. So as Sarah says, it's, you know, we've got the right mechanics in place, but actually we need to think about how we can do more, give more confidence. I think the detriment point is really important. So I'm looking forward to a, you know, a deeper discussion on this at People and Culture Committee in May.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, that next step of the deeper dive into directorates is going to be very interesting as well, because we are looking at a population which is very different in terms of work with the frontline staff. You know, on the emergency ambulance have certain pressures, call centres have other pressures, but have pressures nevertheless. Corporate staff have different pressures, to have some different issues to deal with in their more remote working situations and so on. So looking at the breakdown would be more instructive perhaps, but overall it's more good news than bad news, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a great staff survey, given all of the change of last year as well. You know, we talk about all of the changes that we've made in terms of our operational and clinical that's impacted people, and the pace we've talked about in the previous items. So I think it is a fantastic outcome, and I'm really pleased to see it. I think what would be intriguing for me is sort of, as the CEO, would be when we get that directorate and sort of team-based reporting, I would hazard a guess we could probably know now where our areas of problems might well be. So if we think about all the cultural work we've done around your cultural assessment, metrics, etc., it would be interesting to see if the worry beads that you have in the people and culture arena transpire to be the worry beads when we actually get through to that level of detail. And I think if they do, that kind of gives me a bit of assurance that our temperature check throughout the year is right, because of course this is only a moment in time. This was filled in October, October here. You get the results in March. You know, there's no pace behind an NHS staff survey, is there? So I think I would feel really reassured, particularly through the people committee, if that sense of actually the areas we think we need to worry about are the areas that this once a year survey highlights are the right places to put our improvement muscle and attention.
Yeah, and if I can just come back on that, it's a really valid point, Emma, and just to reassure as well, we obviously do the pulse surveys every 6 weeks. Again, relatively small participation. We're doing more work to try and get that level of engagement, but alongside that, then we have the Freedom to Speak Up quarterly updates. I mean, I would say we have quite significant amounts of people and cultural metrics now. And what we do, obviously, Sarah leads this, is triangulate what we're seeing with those cultural reviews. there shouldn't be any huge
Surprises.
surprises.
Correct. That's what
One of the key challenges I think that we've taken from this, which is really rich intelligence, is that point about the deteriorating relationships and trying to really understand what does that mean? Is that relationships with different directorates, different teams? So what this does give us is that really just rich information to ask the right questions, but agree it is a triangulation.
Thank you so much. You've got Damon's hand.
Simon.
Yeah, thanks. Just recognising the excellent to get that increase in response. I guess it's just on behalf of as a trade union person on the board here, that just reiterating what Hemma said earlier on about the concern regarding the financial situation, and of course, as you said, where majority of some of the savings are. So I hope that doesn't reflect too far going forward in the future. The only question I had is, have we got any further intelligence as to why the Ops Directorate remains the lower area for response?
Do you want to come in? I'm sure Lee might want to say something, but then I'll happily bring in Steph.
So it's not fair to say the Ops Directorate is the first thing, only because I know within.
Only in Directorate, they read the chart.
Within, for example, integrated care had a very high rate of completion. So I think it's reflective of the type of work, and also some of it is about manager access too. I mean, I know, for example, in our integrated care arena, there was an awful lot of managerial support to facilitate, to encourage people in order to do that. And of course, the touch points are fewer given the disparate workforce that we have and access visibility with management. So that plays out for me because, we saw a great increase in integrated care. What I do know, and this has been my challenge to my team, is we also had one of the highest completion in Southeast Territory for EMS.
They won the award
because they won the award, and so what they have done, which is going to be a challenging conversation amongst service managers and heads of service, is so if it can be done there, what is it that you can learn from that in order to improve the completion rates elsewhere? So that's really good, and that's down to Darren and his team in Southeast for EMS. So it's not universal. There are pockets of excellence. My challenge into my directorate will be, folks, what are you going to learn from each other to get that more consistent?
Thank you.
And just to add, and I'm sure Andy's going to say it, one of our other biggest challenges is people, how they identify when they complete the survey.
Yes.
So often colleagues who work in ops are assigning themselves to clinical. As much as we try and remind, it still keeps happening. So it's an area we are absolutely determined to crack, but that does have a blurring of the data. So.
Good. Thank you very much. Any other final comments? Oh,
Yes, please.
Yes. Hello.
Virtual hand went up again. Yeah, thank you. I thought this was really useful report. I just wanted to highlight just a clear observation for me. So I was looking at that involvement stat, and that one, it just stood out. Nearly half of our colleagues feel like they can't be a part of decision making. So it struck a chord with me. And then I started to read further down the report, and I was looking at, we've got 1 in 5 of our colleagues are neurodivergent. We've got colleagues from different ethnic backgrounds, and I think it was just important that we recognise that people will experience that inclusion on decision making in very different ways. So it's something that we probably ought to reflect further on. I know certainly across digital we're looking at that from a design perspective. So how do we get people on board in that journey early? So there's something around timing for me there. I just wanted to share that observation there, Chair.
Good. Thank you, Johnny. Point well made.
Yeah.
So it's being taken on board. Okay, so we'll move on. We'll just take a quick time check, if we may, before we move on. We're due to finish this open board at 1 o'clock. Which is in 1 minute's time. So we're clearly unlikely to do that. But we will carry on, obviously, until we reach the end, and then we will have our lunch break. But I would ask colleagues around the table that if we can be as brief as we can on the other items, no doubt that will help with timing. But if anybody who's watching this, if there are people out there watching it, we obviously are going to overrun slightly beyond the 1 o'clock point. So we move to item 15, which is governance. We have to approve the seal and a couple of other things. So Trish, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So this is the approval of the application of the trust seal, which is required under our standing orders. So there are 6 leases here with respect to health boards for accommodation of Omnicell cabinets in each of the 6 health boards that have a hospital, an ED. And then we have one which is a license to underlet and underlease property at Neathport Talbot. So if they're approved, we'll apply that seal in the break.
So there we are, 7 seals to be applied. Are we all content that that takes place, Martin? Good, thank you very much. We then come to the highlight committee reports. The first one is patient experience assurance. Bethany's not here today, unfortunately, but I know, Terry, you're going to give us a brief update perhaps on that, but if we can keep it brief, given that the AAA reports have all been I guess. So, over to you.
So in the alert section, I just want to highlight the conversation and scrutiny around the putting things right report. So obviously there's been some focus on this because of the challenges, and there's been additional resource put into this area, but there's been a significant abscess in the PTR team. So it was helpful to receive some assurance, but I think that the committee were clear on the expectation of improvement, and the recovery plan wasn't available for review. But I know the exec team discussed this yesterday, so I know there's a focus on it, but it hadn't been circulated to committee. But I know Liam and Bethany are going to have conversation, so I just wanted to mention that. And we heard from a gentleman called Roy Davis. This was related to a prolonged ambulance delay during a cardiac emergency, and not similar to Mr. Clark, really, that we heard from earlier. Very challenging, and that Roy felt there was a lack of empathy from call handlers, and just highlighting the challenge of speed and compassion under operational pressure. It led to a discussion about the prioritisation process and the public's understanding of this. It was, the committee were grateful for Roy sharing the story, and I think what followed was then discussions, as we would expect, around the impact of hospital delays, and also that chest pain being in the orange now category, and that also that point around the empathetic complaints process. So it was a very good discussion, as always, really helpful to hear directly about patient experience. So just bear with me. So we talked about the new emergency clinical indicators, and generally about the, it's good timing for us around the update for the ambulance performance framework. So that was helpful for the committee to get into some of the detail on that, and how the indicators are, the data behind some of the indicators. So, and obviously then some discussion around the MIQPR, the performance report, and the discussion around handover hours over the winter, and the timing of the clinical transformation programme, and the further work on metrics. And we touched on stroke already today, but also that was mentioned with access to thrombectomy across health board partners. We talked about the differences in the purple and red response times. And of course, what we did do is talk quite a lot about the risk, as we always do, 223 in particular, and highlighted staff capacity and meds pressures that affect, our staff and our ability to deliver on some of these key areas. So that's a few highlights.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions to Terry? Thank you. Okay, moving on then to, I think, actually, again, Terry, for the Culture Committee, and apparently we have to approve the TIW Education Commissioning Report.
Yes, so in front of us today is the commissioning report, which sets out the commissioning numbers for 27 to 28. So that letter needs to go to HGIW this week. So that was sorted by the People and Culture Committee. And then just a few highlights. So we heard from Ben Collins, one of the leaders in Lee's team, and actually, Ben gave a really good presentation around his work on visible, grounded, approachable, adaptive and reflective leadership and the difference that he'd made, you know, being a leader with compassion, but also holding people to account. He talked about some of the challenges that he'd experienced, and committee really welcomed the opportunity to hear about how we're driving that culture forward at a local level and the difference that, you know, those leadership skills make. It was a great presentation. So in the director's report, we heard about the health and wellbeing passport, which is there to support conversations between staff and managers. And we heard about the WAST Welcome Digital Handbook. So yeah, there was some great spotlights on initiatives that are a vital part of our cultural journey. And another fantastic nomination, award nomination for our colleagues. And also for me, we talked about the people networks across WAST, and we've now got over 1,000 people. And I think that's a quarter of our workforce as part of those networks, which is really important, touches on the engagement we were referring to in the staff survey results. So in the Director of Ops report, we had a focus on the overruns, reducing the overruns and improving staff experience. And we talked about the next roster review. We had quite a long conversation around the skills mix. It's come up a little bit today, but, you know, there's been some big conversation for us in committee where we sought assurance. But I think a recognition of the challenge that is facing us, but actually that the organisation is, I think, taking that forward in the most positive way possible and looking for solutions. I felt that was a positive conversation. And just thinking back from yeah, and with regard to the skills mix conversation, obviously that is part of the risk that we discussed around workforce anxiety, retention, and reputational risk as well. So I think that's about it from me. Happy to take any questions.
That's great. Thank you much. Any questions on people and culture? Any of us on that committee anyway? Okay. And then Peter, over to you for audit and risk. And again, we have, just to check, we are all content to approve that report that is going in. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Okay, Peter.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief. One alert item that's already come up in the IMTP discussion, and that's really given the challenging financial environment we are entering, is for the board and all committees to set realistic expectations in terms of what's deliverable and the sort of standard of service. So I won't say any more because we had a good debate about this earlier, but important, boards heard it today, that if that message could be cascaded down to all committees, just in terms of managing expectations, that would be really helpful. In terms of the advice, the committee approved the internal audit plan for next year. Ned will remember that plan was the draft plan was circulated prior to it going to ARAC. So there were no changes made to that. So that represents a balanced programme for the year. We approved the risk management policy, which very helpfully now incorporates the risk appetite statements that we as a board agreed some time ago. In terms of Audit Wales, we received their plan for the year, and you'll see that they're proposing an increase of 5.3%, which of course is A, higher than inflation, and B, much higher than the 1.1% increase that we're getting. So suffice to say, ARAC did, I wouldn't say challenge, but asked ask Audit Wales to, to break down and substantiate. That there clearly is investment in staff and other areas that they talked about, and gave us some assurance that in future years the investment now should result in lower future increases. We shall see. In terms of internal audit reports, we had 3 good outcomes: budget setting, the clinical model transformation program, and Charu. They were good reports. We did push internal audit as to could they have a higher categorization. What internal audit did say, the shared services, that they were all 3 of them at the high end of reasonable. And we're talking about 3 highly complex areas there where a significant amount of work has been done. So internal audit gave us the assurance that that result is a very, very good one. But we did push for a higher categorization. Didn't quite get there. My final point, Chair, is in terms of risk management. As you know, ARAC looks after this. Really happy with the progress that Trish and team are making to align the new BAF to our strategic objectives and our risk management. Whilst that work is still in progress, the escalation and communication of key risks to the board will come through the AAA report of the committees that you're hearing now.
Very good. Thank you very much. We've got a couple of approvals, but any questions to Peter? Okay, in that case, we can move straight to those approvals. I think there's 2, aren't there? There's the standards of business conduct, management policy, looking for approval of those 2. Do we contend to approve that? Yep, we all are. Good.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I thought your hand was up for giving approval.
No,
it
sorry.
wasn't. It was too interjected.
Sorry, Trish, a spot on
ADLT.
Yes.
Yes.
On the risk
Yes. So there is still in the risk management policy reference to the ADLT. We were going to bring it because it's come out in our risk internal audit. So we could probably take it here to say, are you comfortable if we remove that because the ADLT is no longer in the structure? And subject to that, we could close that audit recommendation piece off as well. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, well spotted. Thank you, Lee. Okay, so with that caveat, we have to be approved. Okay. And then Jane, over to you for the Finance and Performance Committee of Market.
Thank you, Chair. And we've already covered the alert earlier in the IMTP item. Under advise, really, my thanks again to Trish and her team for the support they give us, chairs and broader committees, to allow us to do the robust governance, I think, and scrutiny that we do. But we did very much welcome a move towards more streamlined and strategically focused reporting, and review the cadence of the committee to avoid duplication where we can, because recognising that there's crossover. In terms of assurance, we did touch on the Welsh Government's recent grip and control guidance that had been issued. That will initially be taken through finance and performance. The financial sustainability programme to come through FPC, but obviously links there to audit as well. And I think in connection with that, just reflecting on some of the conversations that we've had today, I think it gives us an extra not push or challenge in terms of the financial sustainability programme that we get ahead with that. That's due to come to FPC in May. So recognising that we're very shortly now going to sort of start on actually the savings for, potentially 27, 28 is actually anything that we can do and bring forward, I think, on the financial sustainability programme. Let's get ahead of that. So that was just my one reflection, but that otherwise take the report as well, please.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Any questions, comments? No approvals in that section, so that's okay. Right, we just move on then. So we're coming to the end of the meeting. Any reflections that anybody wishes to make in relation to today's business?
I wanted to reflect that it's the first time for me in WAST that we had a live patient as opposed to a pre-recording. And I just think it's just really powerful. So I know that it's always up to the person bringing their story, how they want to do that. But actually having somebody in the room and then being able to ask questions of us and us engage with them, I think is exceptionally powerful. So I think I wanted to say that. And then the second thing is I actually really enjoyed conversations we had today where directors were saying, but what about, so it felt really like challenging, respectful, lots of assurance and a real sense of where we need to go. It's going to be difficult to get there, but my gosh, are we committed to to doing it. So I enjoyed it. So thank you.
Okay, good. My reflection, by the way, in many reflections on our patient story, but one in, not in particular, because they were all particular, but one reflection to comment on now was the relation to there were so many aspects of that case which were beyond our control. The one thing which was absolutely in our control was the way in which we handled the communication.
Yes.
And clearly that wasn't well done.
Yeah.
And I know we're on that case. I know we made massive improvements and we're focused on it. But it just reinforced to me how when things go wrong, you can make it up. It's a bit like it's not the issue, it's the cover up, which is the bigger problem in this case.
Yeah.
The way in which we respond to people can either calm things down, or actually you can add fuel to fire. We probably did in that case. Of course, yes, yeah.
So I think it's been a really good meeting, and I just suppose that the recognition of the amount of work that's had to take place over the past, I don't know, it feels like 4 months or so, but it always feels that, you know, our colleagues are busy, but it's felt more intense. So I hope that I'm afraid to actually, I've been told off so many. Yeah, I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it at that. But then on a not perhaps not so positive note, I just do want to remind colleagues that have put in board papers together about accessibility. So I've seen a lot of improvement in our accessibility around, you know, size, but today we've got a really important strategic document, which is fully justified, and that is the, you know, fairly basic principle of accessibility, and it probably doesn't impact on us in the room, but it does impact on a lot of people, and it's a really important document. So I think it's just worth getting these basic principles right. It's not that difficult. So thank you.
Very good. All right. In that case, we'll close this meeting. We're going to ask for the exclusion of the press and public for our closed board, which will follow. We're giving us 40 minutes for lunch, so we won't split the 5-minute interval. Let's just meet at 2 o'clock, and we'll get moved to the board. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.